Shabbat Sholom. So I am fully aware that the service is going into extra innings right now because we have every possible ritual event happening and we still haven't gotten to Oshanot yet. So I was thinking of not delivering my message this morning, but because of October 7th, I think I have to do it. I feel compelled to share my thoughts. Not because I think that you have to hear them, right? It's nothing special, but it's almost like therapy for me, so I'm actually going to go ahead and do it. I wanted to share with you the first time I walked through Kibbutz Kfar Aza after October 7th. It was only a couple of weeks after October 7th, at the beginning of November, and I found myself there with a group of about 15 other rabbis from around the United States, from different denominations. And we all were wearing flak jackets and helmets because the Israeli artillery was still going every 15 seconds. It was just non-stopping, and there were still snipers in Gaza firing at the kibbutzim. It was really a dangerous situation. But there's a couple of things that I remember past the actual danger of being in a war zone. When we walked in there, everything was destroyed. Homes were leveled to the ground. Children's toys were littered all over the kibbutz. There were still bloodstains that were being cleaned by the Hever Kadisha. Houses were burned. There were still sirens going on from rockets, oncoming rockets, and sometimes you had to go into the shelters in those houses that were destroyed to seek shelter from the rockets. The one thing that really sticks in my mind is the Sukkot. All over the kibbutz, there were Sukkot, like our Sukkah outside. Because October 7th happened on Simchat Torah, the last day of Sukkot. And everybody in the kibbutz was celebrating Sukkot, so their Sukkot were still up. And by the way, every time I went back, including December of last year, the Sukkot were still up. I saw trucks coming in, taking the refrigerators from homes that have been abandoned, right? Because you can imagine. We remember seeing the refrigerators being just like put into the trucks with machines, and I don't know what they're going to do to them. But nobody touched the Sukkot. It was almost like those Sukkot were beyond their normal meaning. Fragile, flimsy, not identical, everyone with its own personality in a sukkah, but they were all still there. And it got me to think about the fragility of life and what those Sukkot really represent. I think they were not broken up because for the soldiers that were encamping in the kibbutz, for the people that went back, for the people like us who went to see, this symbol was an important symbol of fragility to witness. There's a psalm that we recite every day from the beginning of Elul to the end of Sukkot, which is Psalm 27, which begins, David, Adonai Ori Veishi Mimira. God is my light and my salvation. We recite this psalm according to the rabbis because God is my light, that refers to Rosh Hashanah, and my salvation refers to Yom Kippur. But why do we recite it up until Sukkot? Because there's a line in the middle of the psalm that says, Kitzfoneni besukkah beyom ra'ah, because I will find shelter in your sukkah in a day of trouble. So the sukkah is a very powerful symbol. And after October 7, 2023, I think for our generation, it becomes not a symbol of fragility, but of how fragile resilience can be. And I know that's almost an oxymoron, but it's a very powerful image. For centuries, for thousands of years, we seek refuge in the shelter of the sukkah. Our rabbis compare the sukkah to the Anana Kavod, the cloud that accompanied the Bnei Israel through their travels in the wilderness, the shelter, the protection of God. And when you walk through that kibbutz, just weeks after October 7th, you ask yourself, where was the protection of God? And of course, the actual answer is, it's not entirely up to God. Where was our own protection? Did we really grow so arrogant that we could not see we were so completely unprepared for something like this? And this cost the lives to thousands of people. Now, I want to make a parenthesis here and say how excited, ecstatic, overjoyed I am that the hostages are coming home. And by the way, they're still not home. We're a couple of days away from that, and like I said last night, I will not believe it until I see it with my own eyes. However, if it does come to fruition, I want to remember something very important, and I want to remind all of us about it. Because over 200 people were taken by Hamas, we focused tremendously on the hostages. And for these 2 years, we haven't really had a chance to mourn the thousands of lives that were taken by these murderous animals. And now comes the time of reckoning to understand what really happened. 465 men and 1 woman of the Israeli army died fighting in Gaza after October 7th. 800, a little bit over 800 in total, if you count the soldiers that died from October 7th to the day that we went into Gaza. Plus 1,200 civilians. And we know the names of the hostages. We know who they are. We know what they did. We know who their parents were. We don't know anything about the death. It's very little that we know. Not because we don't want to or we don't honor them, but we haven't had a chance. So I want us to all think about that. How many bereaved families we still have amongst our people today? Thousands of bereaved families. And I don't even know what the proportion would be if we took those numbers and just adequated them for the United States. But it'll be more than a few thousand people. After watching the news incessantly for the last couple of days, there's one question that remains. What did they accomplish? And this is a question that doesn't only belong on the lap of Hamas, but on the lap of all of those willing idiots that protested across the world and the streets of our country and in the college campuses. What did you accomplish? What are you going to do now? Now, if this war is really over, which again, I was watching the BBC, which sometimes I do, and they were interviewing an official of Hamas in Qatar that escaped the Israeli strike, which we'll talk about in a second. And he was saying, we're not giving up our arms. Who told you that? So, look, the Israeli army withdrew, we'll get the hostages back. But will Hamas depose their arms? That's a big if and a big question mark. What did they accomplish? And all of these people that protested and hated us and spread the hate and the lies, what are you going to do now? If there's really peace, what are you going to do? Who are you going to hate? It was never about the Palestinians. It was always about hating our people. And that's the real problem. I sent an email to the congregation on Friday with a podcast attached to it by Habib Retik Gur. Habib is one of the top journalists in the state of Israel today. He writes for the Times of Israel, and he is a tremendous thinker. And this podcast that he had, explained exactly how this deal actually was put together. And it was remarkable. And one of the things that really caught my attention was that he explained the strike on Qatar by Israel in a very different way than I ever could have imagined, which is whether the Americans knew about it or not, whether it was all arranged or not, The fact that the Qataris saw that they were vulnerable is what ultimately brought them to the table. And all of these that you have seen since October 7th and October 8th in the United States is in a big part the responsibility of Qatar. So according to Habib, which was remarkable to hear, they came to the President of the United States to complain about the Israeli strike, and he said, okay, I'll sign an executive order saying that we will defend you, give me back the hostages. This is how it went down. Which shows you what many journalists and thinkers have been saying all along. The Qatari money and the Qatari involvement in all of this enterprise has been beyond what any of us could have possibly imagined. And we have to be so careful with Qatar. Let me tell you one more thing. All of us are concerned about the thousands of terrorists that Israel's going to release in this exchange. You know, I heard interviews with parents of people who were killed by these terrorists, spouses, children. By and large, the majority of them say, look, our loved ones were taken. There's nothing we can do. We want our brothers and sisters back. We don't care if they go out on the street. A couple of them did not take it so lightly. But the truth is, these terrorists that are back, they're dead men walking. Because this will never happen again. But Qatar, we have to keep our eye on Qatar. There was an article in the New Yorker about 6 or 7 months ago about how all of this anti-Semitism was funded in college campuses throughout the years from the personal account of the mother of the Emir of Qatar. I read that article with my own, and we all ignored it. We can't ignore it. And now they're getting an Air Force base inside of the United States. So yes, there's always a price to pay to get our brethren back and to bring things to a close. I just hope and pray that this price is not so high that we can never repay it in any way. When we build the sukkah, before we actually put the first stick in the ground, in those days when we put sticks in the ground, now they all click together, we used to say, Yehi Ratzon, Sheteshareh Shechina b'maaseh yadeinu. May it be your will, O God, that your presence resides inside the work of my hands. May the presence of God be always present in that sukkah. Those Sukkot in Kfar Aza and near Oz remind me of that. They were still there because the presence of God was inside those Sukkot. And in a way, it is human to forget how fragile we are. And the symbol of the sukkah, which we always say reminds us of fragility, didn't do much for us 2 years ago to remind us. I want us to remember some of the stories of heroism that came from that day. There are thousands of stories. Without everyday heroes, the death count would have been much, much higher, 2 or 3 times more. Aner Shapira, you remember Aner Shapira, 22-year-old, who was in a shelter in a bus stop, and with his own hands threw out 7 grenades back at Hamas until he couldn't do it anymore and the 8th grenade exploded on him. Aner was with Hirsch when Hirsch was taken. Actually, that grenade was the one that took Hirsch's arm. But some of the people that survived in that shelter survived because of Aner. 22-year-old boy. Rachel Edry of Ofakim. You remember Savta Edry? Savta Rachel? She was in her house. Her son was a policeman who went out to see what was going on in the city, and the terrorists came into her house and took her and her husband hostage. And Rachel, all calm and collected, served them cookies and coffee and kept them calm until the police and the army were able to get in and kill them. Rabbi Chaim Sassi from Sderot, a rabbi who was praying in the synagogue for Simchat Torah, dancing around with the Torah when he heard the shots, and went out and started carrying the wounded towards a safe place when he himself was shot 3 times. And bleeding out, he continued to pull the wounded over to shelter without ever giving up. But the most incredible story, which you actually can see in a TV drama from Israel called Red Alert, which is on Paramount Plus, is a true story of Tali Haddad. Tali Haddad, a middle-aged mother of 3 children. When they hear the shots, her husband's in synagogue, her son takes his Tabor assault rifle, runs out to help. And she runs out after the boy to see where he was. When she cannot find her son, she sees all the wounded and dead around her. And she tells the people who are defending the city, I'm going to go get my car and I'm going to get the wounded to the ambulance station because the ambulance were blown up by Hamas. And they said, no, you're going to get killed. She went, she got her SUV, she, over 13 trips, ferrying wounded people to the Magen David Adom station so they could be taken to safety. Many times encountering terrorists on the way, pulling back, turning around. She did it. She's not unlike you and me, just a normal Jew having a very, very bad day. Dear friends, I want us to remember that when we enter into a sukkah, we are entering a space that admits the wind and admits the stars. Its frailty is what gives it its holiness. It reminds us of the strength that is not found in buildings that are not temporary, but it reminds us of the strength that is found in the human soul and the human heart. This year, when we remember October 7th, all of our Sukkot become a living memorial. Because more than a festival booth, there are promises and prayers that even though we are frail, we are resilient and we will never give up. We remember those who are missing. We remember those who fought to protect us. We remember how our shelters fell, and we remember how we must stand in solidarity. May every sukkah that we enter from now until the end of the holiday remind us of who we are as a people, and that our strength does not come from physical buildings and from fortifications, but that it comes from within, from never giving up, from never staying down, and for literally refusing to die a quiet death. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.